Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SavvyCast. This is Jamie, and I am grateful that you are either watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast on whatever platform you listen. I am bringing back as guests, previous guests to the podcast. I have Elizabeth Brasher and Melanie Nichols from Warren Averett Asset Management with me today. Ladies, thank you for once again joining me on the SavvyCast.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. I have asked Melanie and Elizabeth to speak today to a topic that I think this will apply to anyone watching or listening in some way. It may touch you closer to home. It may be something that affects you or a friend or a relative, but I think it is a discussion that is necessary and very important for everyone, especially to women. And what we are going to be talking about today with Melanie and Elizabeth are pitfalls and things to consider if you or a friend is facing divorce. So thank y'all. Thank y'all for being here to speak to this important topic. And can you all just give your viewpoint, just why you think this is important and what role you play in helping women navigate this very difficult topic?
Right. I'll start. Elizabeth and I have sort of come at this from different directions, but gosh, 23 years ago, I went through an unexpected divorce. And though ultimately it was the right decision for my husband at the time and me, it was very challenging, both from an emotional standpoint and certainly a financial standpoint. And so it is one of my passions to help other women who are trying to navigate what post-marriage looks like from a financial standpoint, help them think through things and make some really sound decisions. So that's sort of the angle I'm taking today.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that. I've never been divorced. I hope I don't experience that. I'm married to an amazing man who's also very cute, but it happens. And people, it happens to, I'm going to say, I'm a believer. It happens to believers all the time. It happens to non-believers. It happens to every walk of life. We're dealing with people. People are unpredictable. So, you do the best you can, but not one person that I know has gotten married with the expectation to get divorced. That's never any little girl's dream.
Right.
And we work with a lot of women, and sometimes they're going through divorce, but sometimes it's their best friend or their children, or it could be a family member. Almost every person, everybody knows someone who's divorced, but we're all impacted by divorce, whether or not we want to be. And so unfortunately it happens, and we're not advocates of the divorce. We don't want divorce to happen. It happens, and we want to be a trusted advisor to help people work through it. And to kind of give let's say an example or a parallel, it's kind of like when we talked about insurance in our segment about just financial planning generally. I do not advocate for you to die and leave your small children. However, I do think we need to prepare in case that happens, and you need life insurance to protect against that. And so that's exactly where we come from with divorce support.
Well, and I appreciate both of your perspectives so much. And then I want to throw in mine. I, of course, I've been in the Christian community. Most of my friends are all believers with strong Christian husbands at some point, but I can count on more than one hand the friends that I have walked through a divorce that they never wanted, never saw coming, with those same men that once were one way, but maybe took another path. You cannot control other people. And I know my last friend that I walked through this with, this man was not concerned with her financial anything. She had been totally dependent upon him. She could have been financially devastated, and she's still just doing the best she can, but she's not in an ideal situation. So I am happy and thrilled to use this platform to educate women especially younger women who maybe aren't even married, to think about these things. Think about them and be prepared. So let's just dig in. Okay. So Melanie, would you like to start since okay.
I would. So, Jamie, we're going to kick this off in a very similar manner than we did the last podcast we shared together. And that is, you want to be organized and understand what assets you and your spouse have, and what liabilities you and your spouse have, and what income you and your spouse have. I can count, 50 or 100 women I have worked with over the last 30 years who sign a tax return but never look at it, who show up for financial meetings and feel intimidated and don't ask questions. So using the premise of I want to get financially organized is a great way to make sure that should something happen down the road, or if you're in the midst of sort of a difficult situation, but you need to know, where are all our bank accounts? And you can tell that. So we've had concerns. Some people have had concerns that maybe their spouse is hiding money, right? Maybe they feel like something's happening in preparation for divorce. On your tax return, because the IRS gets notified of every bit of interest or dividends or earnings that investment accounts produce, on your tax return that you are signing, there's a list of all accounts. Now, at least at the end of the year. So review your tax returns. Go back and look at the last few years if you have not participated in preparing for them. When you pull tax documentation, the W-2 is the statement of earnings that you and your spouse both produce. Get an understanding, get all the retirement assets. And frankly, if you are in the middle of what you think is going to be a divorce situation, make sure you have copies of all of this. One of the first things that you're going to want to produce if you sit down with and meet with either a mediator or an attorney is they're going to want to know, where are your assets? So now is a great time of year to be collecting all that information. The second big thing that's really important, and I would encourage you for just being financially savvy, but you need to track your expenses. You need to know what you guys spend every year and what your children spend, what their needs are, whether it's, daycare or after school activities. Because if you are the one initiating the divorce, you are anticipating we are going to separate. Don't count on big alimony payments, which don't get awarded very much anymore, or huge child support payments. So you need to know, if it costs you $5,000 a month to support yourself, perhaps a rent payment or another mortgage payment, and child support, child expenses, you need to be thinking, can I do this on my own? Now, I don't want, if someone is in a domestic abuse situation or an emotional abuse situation and you have to separate, finances are probably the last thing you're worrying about in that moment, but you're going to have to worry about them. So start, again, figure out where all your assets are collectively and what your expenses are.
And Melanie, may I interrupt to ask you all a question? Do this even if there's no trouble or hint of divorce. So if this is something we women do, then it's not like we're having to learn how to do this and gather everything when the problem might happen.
Right. And I really should have started all this off. Probably the most important thing, which is almost impossible, is don't act while you are hurt and emotional and stressed out. Think about what happens when we have a death in the family. If it was a surprise death, let's say you lost a parent and it was unexpected, trying to make decisions in the heat of our grief is almost impossible. Now, if you had and your parents had come up with a list of things you wanted to make sure that when they passed away, you did X, Y, Z, and you did it 10 years ago, then you've sort of thought through that. So it's the same thing when we are hurt and we are, whether it's of our own choosing, whether we are being emotionally hurt by our partner, trying to make good financial decisions in that moment are almost impossible. So just to be prepared, and hopefully this is like life insurance that you never need, right?
Yes.
That you have prepared, and because you've prepared, then you don't have to call on that preparedness.
Okay, I want to ask another question, and this is a very specific to us question, but I think it would apply to, well, it would apply to anyone else if they were working with you all. I'm sure every firm is different, but you have Zane and me. Now, I would not bank on this in a million years, but if he went crazy and we weren't going to stay together, but you all know everything, you have everything, how do you handle that? Here we are.
That's a great question.
You love us both, but it's not an emotional thing with you all, but we're sitting there. What do you do?
That's a great question. We have found ourselves in a position when two spouses decide for whatever reason, we cannot be married anymore. We help navigate and even can sit down at the table with the mediator or with the attorneys and say, this is what we feel like is a fair division of assets. And having a firm, having an advisor who does know both of you. I know things that might be very important to you, Jamie, that might not be important to Zane, but maybe because I'm not emotionally connected with Zane, I could say, look, this is very important to Jamie. So we need to sort of put this in her column or her bucket, if you will. So I do think that if two people have worked with an advisor over a period of time, the advisors can play a very important role.
Okay, and let me ask this because I know this is going through the heads of other women. If you've worked with someone and there's an issue and you see it may not work, if we're already working with someone like you, we don't have to search for documents. You have everything, and it's not well, we're not going to do it. It's a very factual, practical thing. We're going to pull all these W-2 because you know where everything is. So therefore, if you're in the emotion and the grief that might result in divorce, if you've engaged someone, you don't have to do all this.
That's right. That's
right.
And
occasionally, depending on the situation, we will also step into that role, not necessarily having the document completed, but we work with certain divorce attorneys, even if we have not worked with a client before, as it makes sense. It's a kind of rare, but we can still serve doing what Melanie's talking about in a divorce and then work with someone after the divorce is finished. You want to talk a minute about that, Melanie?
So what Elizabeth is saying is we have been engaged by divorce attorneys, or we have met women who have not been our clients, but have seen us talk about how we serve women going through divorce. And let's say that you have not had much financial experience and you've been taking care of children and now you find yourself in this situation. Many times, again, the emotions come in and people get frightened and they worry, can I survive financially after a divorce? We will sit down with that woman, with a divorce attorney, and sort of be her financial and emotional support going through the process. Because again, you are grieving, whether you want to be divorced or not, you are grieving the loss of your marriage. And it's hard to make decisions in grief. So to be able to look at a woman and say, here's sort of your financial situation, here's how much you need to walk away with in this divorce to live a lifestyle that can support you or you and your children. We run those numbers. We fill that gap for her and give her the comfort that you're not going to be out on the street on your own. We are going to help you navigate this. So
even though y'all are these beautiful, sweet, kind, you will be an advocate and you will make sure you will protect, because I will say, and I know you all see this day in and day out, but a handful of my friends, they are in such grief and maybe feel like if they make demands that might be self-protective, that it's going to alienate them from someone they're still not ready to. I mean, I even had a friend, she was thinking, well, if I try to protect myself and financially, it's going to drive him further away. Emotions that make really no sense from a practical point, because some women kick and scream all the way to the divorce court.
Right.
So you all can step in, or whomever is a financial advisor, in a clear, objective way And then you can advocate every single aspect of that on behalf of the woman.
Yes. Yes.
Now, how do you do that if you're working with both in the good times and in the bad? Well, how would you navigate that? And maybe it's not somebody like Zane, and maybe it's somebody where there's contention and you've worked with them both. Is that difficult?
Yes, it would be. And there's a couple of different options. So if this were you and Zane, and you felt very strongly that I am not going to go build a relationship with another advisor, I like Melanie and Elizabeth, and I want to stay here, well, then Zane would have two choices. Maybe he goes to work with one of our male advisors, and we sort of separate that way. And we do that more often than you would think. But maybe that spouse, the husband, says, you know what, I'm just going to take my business and I'm going to go somewhere else, or I'm going to do it myself. But yes, that is also something that we talk about.
Wow. Okay. Well, y'all continue. I just wanted to insert those questions. So it's very important then gathering documentation and then tracking expenses.
Right. And then the last thing I'll share before Elizabeth jumps in is trying to build your team. You know, if you have assets you are fairly wealthy and you know that financially things are going to be okay, then maybe you do hire a financial advisor first to talk through some of this before you go find a divorce attorney. Maybe you have to find a divorce attorney first. Elizabeth and I probably get a request every month for, hey, this is my friend's situation, or this is my situation. Help me navigate and find the right divorce attorney. So you want to make sure that you've got a financial person helping you. Your lawyer may be able to serve in that role. It just depends. People are very different. Some lawyers are very hands-on and they are like fraud and forensic specialists if there's businesses, but some want to do the negotiating, and they don't want to spend the aftercare time to help a woman deal with her new reality. So it just depends, right? But I think the three things you need an emotional support person. That probably should be a therapist or, a religious person, maybe both of those two things. But I think a therapist that can help you work through the emotional piece, a financial person, and an attorney. Remember that though the attorney might seem like the most important person, their job is done when that divorce is signed. So you're still going to want or need this emotional support, and you're still going to want and need some financial support. So those are the three sort of prongs of support that you need to navigate a divorce.
And can I just say, and correct me if I'm wrong, now, of course, the emotional is important, but you can have, friends can be as emotionally invested in this divorce. I know I was no help because I was always so upset I was not friends can't always be objective,
Right.
but the legal, you can go get a divorce on any block. You can find a divorce attorney anywhere. To me, the most important aspect of this is the financial. If you're not, that will affect your emotions, and it will affect everything about your life and possibly your children's. So to me, good times and bad, I would make sure that I was looking out financially and preparing for the eventuality of divorce, even though it may never happen and you hope it never happens. Is that inaccurate? These three things, I don't think they're equal.
I would agree with that. And the other thing is, you don't want to find yourself in a position, again, you mentioned you're going to prepare for it and hope it never happens. You don't want to find yourself in a position of weakness. You want to go into whatever negotiations, whatever that is, as an equal partner. It doesn't mean you earn the equal amount, but if you've been home raising children, you have worth and you have value, and you deserve to be treated fairly financially. So yes, again, we're partial, right? Because we do the financial piece, but we've seen how devastating it can be for someone who doesn't get good financial advice, because once that divorce document is signed, it is very hard to get anything changed. So you want to make sure things to get done right up front.
People get really wary with this process. And I have a lot of friends who are the breadwinner and who are like, if they're facing divorce, they may be the one who's going to have to pay out. And so that also, to your point, Jamie, makes the financial team really important prior to starting the divorce process, because they need to know what they're facing and get their ducks in a row before proceeding.
Okay, that's a very good point. And that leads me to my next question. Women who've always stayed at home, whose husbands are the primary breadwinners, and who are there's a lot of wealth. They cannot assume that they're going to be taken care of, correct? He may be worth millions, but Melanie, have you all seen women married to very wealthy men where when things go wrong, they're left destitute?
I haven't seen destitute, but
that was an emotional word, but that they didn't come out like they would have expected.
No, there is no such thing as let's assume we're going to split this down the middle and move on. It doesn't happen. There could be reasons. Maybe the spouse is wealthy because it's a family business. Maybe that business is not even in the husband's name, but in a trust or a family trust. Wealthy families do a lot of things to make sure that wealth stays in the bloodline or in the family. And so you could have married someone whose name might be on a building and assumed that if the divorce happens, that you're going to be extremely well taken care of. Frankly, that spouse may have no control over that family wealth. And so it's very important not to make assumptions here and to think through, what is the likelihood that I'm going to get alimony? For how long am I going to get alimony? And, we all know that child support ends at a certain amount of time. And once you are not getting the standard Alabama required child support because you make so much money, the child support could be much smaller than you actually need. So again, making assumptions puts people in a very non-equitable relationship. So that's why you want to be prepared.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, now in driving, sometimes I'll be listening to podcasts or talk radio, and there will be ads some are directed toward men, but if you're about to go through a divorce, do these things or call us, da, 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 da. And sometimes I wonder if they're having to advertise for that, if that's reputable, like what kind of, like, for whether people say, here's free advice or here, call me. How do you find reputable advice if you're not already engaged with a team in every area, financially and so forth, from the financial standpoint?
Well,
legal.
Yeah.
Sorry, we got both.
That's totally fine. If you have a friend who's gone through this, like, divorce is awful, okay, and it's emotional and it's terrifying. No one is ever going to be pleased with what happened, right? But your friend may have had the most positive experience they could possibly have had given the circumstances that they experienced. And so I think, and especially as women, our first resource is our community, right? And so I would reach out to your friends that, who've gone through this and ask questions about, what did you learn from this? What would you have done differently? Who would you reach out to? We'll put our contact information somewhere. I am more than happy to help direct people where they need to go. Like, it may not be us, but I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who's in a spot and help them get somewhere. So I'm an attorney. I do not practice anymore, but I did. I have a large network of friends in the area who work with all kinds of women, different age, stage, asset level, and I can help navigate a lot of that in terms of directing you to where you need to go. Emotional support as well. Like, we have a network of therapists that we can recommend and that kind of thing. So I'm happy to help anybody direct them where they need to go. But in terms of free advice, I'd be very, very careful. One, because nothing is ever free. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
But two, you don't know that the advice really works for you. So just because something may work for Melanie, it doesn't mean it works for me. And again, as women, I feel like we often hear, well, my sister did this, or well, so-and-so told my sister to do that. That your sister's not you, or your best friend's not you, and you have different circumstances and you have different situations. And so that's another really big reason why you need to make sure you get with a good team. Because, like Melanie mentioned the term equitable earlier, and you want to make sure you get an equitable settlement. Well, equal does not always mean equitable, and equitable does not always mean equal. So when we talk about splitting something 50-50 down the middle, that's not always accurate. It doesn't always mean it's the best case for you because, for example, certain assets have tax consequences that we may not be considering. And so you may say, well, I want half of his retirement account, or I want half of this or half of that. Well, it may not be the best for you when it comes down to tax considerations or property, for example. Property is a big one. Like, we have clients who have huge holdings in physical property. Well, that's very difficult to split. So you're selling a bunch of stuff and sometimes it may have to be a fire sale. So then you're not getting your highest and best use. And so again, sitting with trusted advisors who can help you say, well, you've got a half interest in this property, but we don't want to fire sale it. So let's maybe look to see, let's see what we can do to help make the money work until we can sell that property or whatever it makes sense. A team is just so, so crucial. And, and going through these things can be really, really difficult. And we talked in our last segment about obtaining credit cards in your own name and how that helps your credit. Well, when you're going through a divorce, and again, I have friends who are either the breadwinner or some of them have stay-at-home husbands. That's something that's happening now more and more.
Yeah.
And so you really have to be careful to protect yourself because you may be facing alimony, or you may be facing child support payments, or you may be facing something that traditionally our moms typically did not deal with. Mm-hmm. And so you really need to get your ducks in a row before you kind of start going on that path. Like Melanie talked about, to be coming at it from a practical point of view. And so if you are thinking you may want to go through a divorce, you could consider opening a PO box in your name only, and you could start accepting mail from there and not tell your spouse, because that's the best way to start kind of getting, because if you start getting mail at your house from attorneys or credit cards, because it's also a good time to go ahead, if you have not already, and get a credit card in your name only. And then you could have the statements go to that PO box. And that way nobody can see it and you can start getting your ducks in a row.
But to that point, let me just interject because this is so helpful. In the previous episode, which if you haven't watched or listened to the previous episode about becoming financially astute, who wants to have to do that because you see a divorce coming?
Oh yeah.
To try to start building credit in the middle of a crisis. How long? Because you can only do so much. So start early, start on these things in the hopes that you never have to have divorce issues. But yes. So, and let me also, because I know we have listeners all over the country, even outside of the United States, because you've said you all have a network. If someone is in another state and they call you all, can you either direct them to someone in their state, or are you still able to help them within the parameters of their state? Because I know Alabama has its specific legal, I don't even know the terminology, but am I making sense?
You are. And the answer is yes to both. We can help.
Okay.
We can help. And every situation is different. So depending on what kind of help they need or want, we are not bound to Alabama in terms of our financial services and what we do. And I am not a practicing lawyer. So even in the state of Alabama, I am not a practicing lawyer anymore. I'm on what's called special status. So I have an active license, but I'm not allowed to practice law in the state of Alabama. So I have legal knowledge that I'm happy to share, but it's technically not legal advice. So you need to get your own attorney for a divorce. Mm-hmm. I do not draft documents or actually sign the divorce papers. But so we serve in that financial role. But if I have someone who's looking for, I have an example. I have a friend a friend of mine is going through a divorce right now in New York City. I was able to help her find an attorney, and I'm helping her navigate that right now. And so we are able to do that and serve in any way, no matter where someone is. We have networks that we can call upon.
Okay, wonderful. That is wonderful. So I'm glad you clarified that. Okay, so the PO box and so forth. So get back into that. And then what about, like, I know there's a lot of email correspondence and people sharing online accounts. What are some considerations with that?
Assume that anything you put in email or text will be shown as an exhibit in a court of law. So be very, very, very careful what you're saying to who, what you're emailing, what you're texting. Assume that your spouse is reading your text messages. Assume your spouse is reading your emails. Try to be very careful. Now, if you're emailing directly with an attorney by yourself, like it's just you and the attorney, you should have attorney-client privilege. So those emails would not be able to be exhibits in a court of law, but I would just be very careful what you put in writing.
So you're saying that in the court, even if they're not on your email account, they can subpoena those emails and they can call. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. And go ahead, Melanie.
I was going to say, let's say you find yourself in a situation that you are about to engage an attorney. All right. So instead of using your regular email, set up a new email account that the only thing that new email account is for emailing your attorney. And then you don't find yourself having an attorney send a bill or an email to you at the account that your husband might see, or that is the password is saved on your computer. So I would start the process by saying, I think this is going to happen. So I'm going to have, melanie.nichols2022@gmail.com or some email account that is the only thing. And that's a way, as Elizabeth said, to keep divorce information segregated.
And that still could be subpoenaed, but if you're conversing with your attorney, he or she would be able to guide those conversations. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And one more thing, I know we keep talking a lot about women who may stay home or not the breadwinner. One thing to consider with that, because most times those women are also the ones who are doing the grocery shopping, they're running errands, doing all that. If you can, and you think this is happening, if your spouse does not look at the receipts, you could start buying gift cards to Publix in $20 increments or $50, whatever you think would not be noticeable, and go ahead and start stocking up on those so that if you know this is coming, so then you have those so you can still get groceries or eat, because gift cards are not traceable typically. And most times, like I know my husband never looks at the grocery store receipt, and $20 for most of us who have a family is nothing, right?
Right.
And so that would be easy to kind of start if you do not anticipate having income coming in, and while you're going through the divorce process, assuming accounts were frozen or whatnot, you could survive for a little bit. Gas cards, grocery store cards, gift cards.
Okay. Along that note, because my head is spinning. So in addition to that, if you see a divorce coming as a woman and everything as far as financially is in a joint account, how do you go if his name is on everything and you can't pull it out without his permission? Is that where the gift cards come in and starting to pull away? So how does that work? Everything's in his account.
That's really good.
Though everything is joint.
Oh, so he can't pull it all out either without, if you're in a joint account?
Well, legally he can. Now you hope that his attorney is going to say that was a terrible idea, but it's legally 100% yours. It's legally 100% his. So it's messy. So what Elizabeth is suggesting, that, if you are at the grocery store and you get $20 cash back, or you throw in a gift card here or there, that is not a long-term fix, because frankly, you can't accumulate enough if you don't have your own bank account. But it is a short-term, week or two, you could
Tide you over.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you go? Because see, to me, that is, and to anyone listening, that is just getting by. Do you start trying to get big money?
That's where your attorney, you've got to get some advice for the attorney. The last thing you want to do is tick off the courts because you went and yanked $10,000 out of a joint account. So again, this is why it's important to have an account that's just yours and have some cash when you need it. I mean, that's just everyday good advice, but it would become very important as you think through a divorce.
And every situation is so different. So that's again why the team is so important to help navigate through some of this.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, because every situation, you may be stay at home with small children. You as the woman may be the primary breadwinner. He stays home. You may be someone who's never worked, whose husband is extremely wealthy or a huge breadwinner. There's so many angles that literally, unless you are aware of all of these, have a team.
Yes.
And at Warren Averett Asset Managers, you all have, I know, Elizabeth, you are not practicing, but do you have any divorce attorneys on the team, or that you work with regularly who are like part of your team? Okay.
Yes.
So you're not out fishing for someone new who you think is going to do a good job. Okay.
No, we have recommendations, and we like to make recommendations based on the personality of the person who needs the help. So we can help build the team with outside partners to fill the holes that we lack.
Got it. And you've already built relationships that,
Yes.
and you communicate. Okay. Well, then what about, we're getting toward the end, but just understanding the different options for divorce,
Yeah.
because I know they can all look different.
Yeah, and we're talking about protecting yourself, and we're assuming that this is getting nasty, right? Because if you're at the point where you're trying to hide gift cards, you're assuming this is going to be nasty. It's going to be a fight, and you just don't know, because people do crazy things when they're hurt, and when again, like Melanie mentioned earlier, even if you want the divorce, even if you're I'm going to say the bad actor, okay? Let's say you've had an affair, or you're the one that wants the divorce, or whatever. It's still heartbreaking to go through divorce. This is still someone that you built a life with, and you're going through all this. But everything we've said has kind of been, you're going to have a fight, right? So, and sometimes we call those contested divorce. And that can be where one person wants divorce, the other person does not, okay? Or they both want to get divorced, but they're contesting assets. So that's one situation. Another situation is a mediated divorce, where you go to a mediator and you basically say, look, we just need help figuring this out. And the other option is something more like collaborative, which is kind of like a mediated divorce, but you basically sit down together and you say, look, we know this is not working out. We do not want to be together. This is a settlement that we feel good about with each other. And you just come to terms together. And because sometimes people know it's just not working out. And sometimes people can get together and do that without an additional cost of having a professional come in and do that. But there are options. It doesn't have to be a fight every time.
Mm-hmm. So if the mediated, is that one that pretty much everything is worked out outside of a courtroom?
Yes. And there are
around a boardroom, or
yes. And there are attorneys who actually specialize in that. We've had clients who have actually sought out a mediation divorce attorney, because it wasn't nasty. It just, there were circumstances that warranted a divorce, and they needed to get divorced, and they didn't want to get in a fight. And so they hired an attorney who did this mediated divorce. They both walked in. They said, look, she said, I need this to live on. He said, I need this to live on. And then the mediator helped them kind of figure it out. And so that worked really well for them. And so it just depends on what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any other practical considerations before I want to ask Melanie a question to end this out? One that I have for her, knowing that you've gone through this, but are there any other practical considerations to any woman, great marriage, newlywed, single, but that you would say, just do these things in case ever?
I've got, our whole premise is being financially educated. Statistics show that most women will live alone at some point in their life, either by choice, by divorce, or their spouse died. And so I would just encourage everyone to take whatever small steps to get started and take control of your own financial information. It will serve you if you never get divorced and you have the very best marriage that has ever been, and then you find yourself alone. If you are not an equal participant in the financial decisions, if you didn't have a great advisor, you're going to be in a mess. Make 2022 the year that you decide, I'm going to get a handle on my financial situation.
That is wonderful. That is such great advice. Melanie, could we end this? I'm so grateful to both of you for coming, but just on a personal note, just from your standpoint, what do you wish that you had known, younger Melanie? You never had an idea that you had faced divorce, which is most women, if not all, that you don't go into marriage thinking that. What do you wish you had known looking back?
Well, and that's such a hard thing, because we had a small child and emotions were running hot, and we had two very, I would say, antagonistic lawyers participating in this. I didn't fully grasp that I'm going to co-parent with my ex-spouse, frankly, for the remainder of my life. And I will tell you that we didn't do it well, and I will take a good chunk of responsibility for that. And our child was 3 when we divorced, and we were both angry. We were both hurt. I'm sure we said things in front of our child that were inappropriate because you're just devastated, even if it's what you wanted. And we frankly spent 17 years acting like that. And it was not until our child was in we had a very traumatic situation, and a counselor looked at us and said, if you all don't get it together, your kid's not going to survive this, that we appreciated how much we needed to let go of some of that hurt. I could not have let go of some of that hurt way back, but I wish that someone had said to me, just remember that your words and things that you say, you're still going to pass this child back and forth on weekends. You're still going to have Christmas Day. You're going to hopefully have grandchildren together one day. And do you want to show up at the hospital to see your, very first grandchild and not have a relationship with that ex-spouse? So, I mean, that takes a lot of prayer. It takes a lot of communication. But I think that's what I would say to certainly young women who are navigating this is, I know you're hurt. I know you're mad. I know they are too, but you want to work towards a compatible relationship, because this child will always be your child, the two of you. And, you may not want that, but that's the reality. So I think that's that I would encourage people to try to work towards that.
Wow, that is sage advice. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's very personal, but that is so helpful. So I just want to end this. Anyone listening who wants to get in touch with you all, I'm just going to go ahead and say, get in touch with either y'all or someone like you when things are great. I'm so grateful that we engaged with you when we did, Zane and I, because now I'm aware of how important this is. But so many women aren't, because we all think the best is going to happen. We don't realize that, Melanie, what you said, 50% of us?
70% will be living alone at some point.
Okay, and that's a statistic.
Yeah.
So and the only way that is going to happen is death or divorce. Is that correct? One of those two. Or
you choose to be single, right?
Oh, well,
yes.
Okay. Yes. So how can any woman anywhere in the country or United States connect with you, whether they'll stay with you or they will be directed to someone who can help them at I know there are different income levels, there are different scenarios and situations, but you all are so wonderful at helping connect or engaging with them. How can they get in touch with you? And we will put every single thing in the show notes, every link, but just generally right now, how can they get in touch with you?
Perfect. So our website is wassets.com, and you can, capital W, capital A.
Do they have to capitalize? Because WAA, because it's wassets.com, and it'll be in the show notes.
Yes. And just connect. Elizabeth and I are on the website, and there's a link about Women's Wealth Connection, which is the practice that we run together, focusing on women and their families. And also we will send you updated links on the show notes. So Jamie, thank you so much for your time. You've got such a great following, and hopefully this helped someone today.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all both so much.